work session with vacant property and building registration. Doug, you want to take off on the lead of this?
Hello, everyone. Here to talk about the vacant property and vacant building ordinance. The program was started in February of 2011 after the Community Development Department noticed a large number of vacant properties. City Council passed the ordinance in February and the program was implemented. The housing inspectors were having difficulty obtaining compliance and identifying who was responsible for the properties. In many cases, when we cited property owners, they informed staff that they had vacated the property because the lender began the foreclosure process. We researched a number of programs and took portions of ordinances from 3 communities, which were Southview, Cleveland Heights, and Cincinnati. The ordinance and overall program was forwarded to the Housing Task Force for their review and approval. I won't read them to you, but that basically describes the purpose of the vacant property and building ordinance. The presentation outline is listed below. Staff did receive questions from City Council, and the presentation was developed to answer those questions and provide basic overview of the program and how it's administered. One of the questions was the definition of a vacant building. The definition of vacant building is included in Painesville Codified Ordinance Section 137502E, which defines vacant building. This is a list of the various criteria that we use to identify a vacant property. Abandoned property occurs when the property owner has informed us that they've moved out of the property as a result of the foreclosure action. So this really defines vacancy and what we are looking for in a vacant property. One of the things that we will do, and I'll talk about it a little later, is for the various criteria that are established, we'll have a checklist when the housing inspectors are out in the community looking for or trying to identify vacant properties. We will be implementing a standard operating procedures in 2018. There was an internal policy to identify vacant properties, which is included up on the screen. We wanted to be proactive, as council requested, in identifying those vacant properties as soon as possible. So we put together the internal policy to identify them so that we could begin identifying them and sending out letters to make sure that they were aware that there was a vacant property ordinance within the city. The recommendation, this is the SOP that we developed. We would obtain information from the utility department, from the zero consumption reports. That was talked about. Inspect each street within the respective zones a minimum of twice a year. That will be walking, as I mentioned, and they will have a checklist to identify, to easily check off items where they feel that the property may be vacant. And then we'll encourage residents to identify and report vacant properties in their neighborhood, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the recommendation was presented to the Housing Task Force as far as the internal policy. It was presented to them for review and comment, and it was approved and will be fully implemented in 2018. The utility department report. There's a utility department, there's an example of the utility department report in your packet as well that identifies all those properties with zero consumption. This is the main way we're able to identify properties is through the zero consumption report, and they provided the utilities department provides it on a monthly basis to the community development department. It identifies properties with zero consumption and provides the number of months it has been at zero consumption. So you can see the count number, the address, the name, months of the zero consumption, and the last date of zero consumption. So some of them are into 32, 33. Well, what we're looking for is the ones that are the lowest ones, because basically when we started sending those out, those people have already received the letter basically stating that their property is vacant and they need to register it with the city. So now it makes it a lot easier for us when an address comes up. If it's a 3 or a 4, we can identify that and letters are sent to those specific addresses. Does that make sense?
3 or 4 what?
3 or 4 months vacant. So that's what we're looking for. We're trying to get them to them as soon as possible.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Or you want to wait? Okay.
What do you want to do?
I guess can I ask a question about consumption?
Sure.
So, in the beginning, when you look at vacant properties, when you look at page 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, it says that it's unoccupied and have the utilities disconnected. Is there a difference between disconnected and if somebody calls and says, hey, I'm going to Florida for 3 months, I'd like no water turned on, I'd like to turn my water off for safety so my house doesn't flood? So how do you, with only 3 months, determine those that are, out for the season and those that are?
Basically, we look at it case-by-case basis. Typically, if it's been vacant for 3 months, it's noted on the screen that utilities what it's been vacant for. So if they have the intent to come back and occupy the house, then I consider it occupied. If they haven't moved their furnishings out, things of that nature.
So it's just not so disconnected is not different from turning your water off. So if I call and say, hey, I'd like my water turned off, that's still considered disconnected, correct? 'Cause
It's considered disconnected,
okay.
but in talking with our attorney, if they have the intent to live in the house and they have not removed any of their furnishings, things of that nature, it's considered occupied still.
Right. Thank you.
Or if you call the city up there, your water turned off the curb, they're in charge, you come and turn it back on.
Correct. Letters, when we get the zero consumption report, letters are produced and sent to each property owner of the record through the Lake County Auditor's Office, which is the address that we're required to use to send out letters so that it's legal, and also the address of record with the utility departments. They may differ, but that's why we send them out to both locations. This serves as their formal notice to either register the property or request an exemption within 30 days of receipt of the letter. The copy of the letter is included in your packet as well, so you have a copy of the letter that we actually send out to residents. If they call community development, we provide them with the available options and explain if there are past due fees. The zero consumption report is an effective means to determine occupancy because Painesville codified ordinance requires utilities to be connected and functional in order to occupy a property. So you have to have utilities for the property to be occupied. I talked about how the SOP and that we will be inspecting each street within each zone a minimum of twice a year. I'm having the housing inspectors walk the street, weather permitting, to identify all those things that were listed in the vacant property ordinance as far as defining vacancy. Evidence of vacancy is defined in 1375-02F, that any condition that on its own or combined with other conditions would lead a reasonable person to believe the property is vacant And there are four main conditions that the property maintenance inspectors look at, or housing inspectors. Overgrowth and/or dead vegetation, that's the first sign. I mean, when we started seeing a lot of vacant properties, the first sign of that was the grass is 8 to 10 inches high. Accumulation of newspapers, circulars, telephone books, and/or mail on the porch. I don't know, I was in my neighborhood and saw a telephone book in the middle of the yard the other day. I think they were delivered back in September of last year. So that's one of those signs that it's all wrapped up in plastic, but it's sitting in the middle of the yard that we look for. The accumulation of trash, junk or debris, and but basically, I mean, or broken or boarded up windows. Broken and boarded up windows is always a sign. Typically, if you have kids in the neighborhood and they know it's vacant, it gives them something. I mean, typically what we've seen is kids have thrown rocks at windows and things of that nature. So it's very easy for them to identify. And the absence of window covering, such as curtains, blinds, or shutters, is a huge sign that the property is vacant. We're also working with residents to identify and report vacant properties in their neighborhoods. Some of the methods that are in the SOP are work with neighborhood homeowners associations. We currently do that. College Hill is a good example where we work with them and they're able to inform us what properties are vacant within their allotment. Printed materials in the Painesville Pride. We have done articles on the vacant property program, informing people of it 3 times in the past in the Painesville Pride, and will continue to do so. And then notices on utility bills. We recently put out a notice in the utility bills that if they notice a property that's vacant, please report it to the Community Development Department. And items on the website and Facebook. As soon as the new communication coordinator comes on board, we'll look at other ways of making residents aware of the vacant property program and asking for their assistance in working with us to inform us of various vacant properties within their neighborhoods. The owner's responsibility tied to vacant properties is to register. The main responsibility of property owners is to become aware of the regulations within the community that may impact them. If a property owner is aware of the regulations, they are able to make more informed decisions. If the property is to become vacant, the property owner is responsible for either registering the program or requesting an exemption. But basically, they need to make sure that they either register it or request an exemption, ensure that it continues to be maintained, make sure that somebody's checking on the property, and that utilities are available and functioning. If they received a foreclosure letter, it's as easy as letting us know, calling us, and I mean, once they receive their vacant property letter, if they've been evicted due to foreclosure, all they need to do is call us and let us know. Then typically what we'll do is go after the bank because they are still responsible for the property. Or they can file an affidavit to show the property was not vacant. The reasons for exemption, property owners may apply for exemptions that are applicable in order to make sure the property is occupied, which is one of the objectives of the program. The typical exemption lasts anywhere from 1 year to 2 years. That's typically what we're seeing. We require all properties that are vacant 90 days or more to file an exemption or register with the city. If they are notified by the Community Development Department, they have 30 days to register, and that's comes specifically from the ordinance. that once you're notified, you have 30 days to either register or file the exemption. Per section 1375-075 of the codified ordinance, there are 6 items or reasons to grant the exemption, and they are listed up there. And they vary in length of time. During the period that they are vacant, the fees are waived, and this is important, but the property is still considered vacant until such time it is occupied for the use intended. Provided in your packet is a registration form and also an exemption request form. So those are included in your packet as well, so that you can see what those forms are like. If a person were to fill them out, it would take probably 5 to 10 minutes, that's it.
So Doug, if I inherited a property because of, or let's just say I didn't inherit, maybe my, somebody passes away and their estate goes into probate, and nobody really has the property because it's in probate, how do you manage a situation like that?
Typically, probate will pay
Probate will pay?
before it's transferred.
Do you have vacant property fees, you mean?
Yeah, they'll pay vacant property. The prior owner is the one who's responsible for fees. Once it's transferred, the new owner is not responsible for those fees. And what I did is I included a legal ruling from Joe Gurley in your packet, which states that. However, we do inform them that there are past due fees when they're looking to acquire, because what we do have the ability to do is not transfer the utilities until those fees are paid. And that was something that Councilmember Jenkins had requested, I think in 2014, as far as the property being transferred. Is the new property owner responsible for that? No, they're not. The old property owner is responsible for it, but we can still hold back transferring the utilities until the old owner pays the vacant property fees.
And we make every effort for that fee to be assessed prior to closing, prior to transfer, prior to all that, right?
There are very, very few instances where people are not checking with us in advance. We put information out there, to title agents. It took a while, but title agents and realtors now are aware of the rental registration and the vacant property ordinance. And they call us because they don't want their new buyers, to get stuck with no utilities, as they're moving into the house, because the vacant property fees haven't been paid. So what we're finding is, in a few rare incidents we had, I can remember a couple recently, where the person purchased the property, they did not contact from a seller, so it was basically a for sale by owner. They contacted them directly. They did not contact the community development department to see if there were any fees. Now we have people come in and give us a call ahead of time and check that. Is there anything that I need to be aware of as far as fees are concerned? Every title company sends us an email or calls us and requests information on the property. It's not even a question at this point. It's something they automatically do. And usually within 24 to 48 hours we can get a response, and then they can close on the property. The other instance was when somebody bought it at sheriff's sale. They bought it at sheriff's sale. There's a book over there that the clerk is supposed to refer them to as far as potential fees. In the I believe it's the treasurer's office. There was somebody new and they weren't told to look at the book. They purchased the property at a sheriff's sale and owed fees on it. So they were buying it basically to fix up and sell.
Do those fees have to be paid by the new owner to get their lights back on?
They are, because in foreclosure, they tell you you're responsible for any and all fees that are still
Buyer
outstanding.
beware as is.
Yeah. So that's why they told us that they needed something from us over in the clerk's office that they could go look at. So if you're buying in Painesville, it lists a tab of Painesville, what you should look for, I mean, when you're purchasing properties out of sheriff's sale.
And the sheriff's sale doesn't have to go through a title company then? They don't do a title search? So that's why the title company wouldn't have helped them in that sense?
They're getting probably a quick claim deed, and that would be probably a better question for the attorney, but my
Okay.
guess is that
Okay.
they just claim deeded over. With the exemptions, I said they're varying lengths of time. Building permits are good or don't expire. I mean, if they come in and get a building permit, it's good for the longest running currently active building permit. So for example, they can get a electric permit, that's good for 1 year. If you file it before that, that's when it ends basically, but they could come in and get a plumbing permit, which is also good for a year. So that would take them into the second year. Then they could list it for sale, that could take them into the third year. So as long as they are obtaining permits or in accordance with the requirements of the ordinance, it could go on for a period of time. Buildings that suffer from fire damage or damage, can we go back one? Or damage caused by extreme weather, it's 90 days. And typically it's 90 days because people contact their insurance agent, they're getting permits to fix up the house or they're gonna demo the house. Buildings that are listed with license, state of Ohio realtors have 12 months. So if you list your house, you have 12 months to sell it before you would actually have to pay fees. This was presented, all these timelines were presented to the Housing Task Force, and the purpose of establishing the 12 months is, what we were seeing is, in some of these buildings, particularly in the downtown, they would overprice them at $500,000 and list it with the realtor, knowing that that wasn't realistic. We have one that was listed for $500,000 for a short period of time. Once the vacant property ordinance was put in place, they kept lowering the price and finally ended up selling it to a buyer under a land contract for $100,000. So basically, that's what we wanted to see that property turn over. Then they can request an exemption for any reason. So for any reason, you can come in if it's vacant and request. So I'm going to Florida and I have an exemption. Yep, I'm giving you a 6-month exemption because you're going to Florida. I mean, basically, they still have the intent to occupy it. They don't necessarily have to do that, but that's a reason. They want to work on it, but they don't. But the work that they're doing on the house only requires painting and carpeting. Okay? Typically, what I'll do is I'll give them 6 months, and I tell them if they don't get it done in that period of time, come back to me and I'll grant you another 6-month exemption. So it's worked out very well. That's what people have done. And all they need to do is email me, and I just send them an email stating that I've extended it for another 6 months and noted in the system. Yes.
So going back to the probate issue, so my mother died, she doesn't have a will, her thing's going through probate, and I know that in the end, I'm gonna get it. So could I then apply for an exemption, saying, hey, this is gonna be in probate for a good 6 months, it's gonna end up coming back to me anyway?
You can
I can't
request it.
control its vacancy, but we're gonna take care of the property, we're gonna cut the grass, and
Yes.
I'm not gonna have any, so they could also.
The answer is yes. We
Okay.
only had one do that, and they had nobody to leave the house to. So when it went to probate, we sent a letter over to the probate, basically stating it's vacant and fees are due on it. So they addressed it. All right, next one. Exemption request, when they submitted an exemption, typically is sent to Community Development Department. And what I tend to look for is, was the exemption requested within the 90 days? If not, the exemption is still approved, but they may owe fees. Did the exemption meet one or more of the permitted criteria, which we just addressed? And the only reason that an exemption is denied is because they didn't submit the proper documentation. Typically, what we will see, or the majority of requests for exemption, are because the property is listed and they didn't submit the MLS showing the start date and the end date. So once I work that out with the realtors, within a day or two, we typically have it approved and the property can close. Again, that has not been an issue. The affidavit of facts. Affidavit of facts are challenges to an administrative determination of vacancy, if that makes sense. Basically, what they're doing is when they submit that, they're saying the property was occupied the entire time. We're asking them to provide documentation that the property was occupied. Whether they're working on it, people are maintaining it internally, they went out of the country for a year because they were working in France. People regularly checking on the property or proof that it was listed and being shown. So as long as they can provide information that it was occupied at some point in time, then basically we will grant the I don't grant an exemption because here's the difference. When they submit the affidavit, they're requesting, saying that it was occupied. What I do is make a determination of occupancy. And I've not denied one yet. So if they submit the information, that's typically going to get approved because they're showing occupancy of the property. They need to show it was regularly maintained. They need to explain the low consumption and anything additional that bolsters their case. There are 2 or 3 examples of affidavits that are in your packet. If you read those affidavits, you'll see what people have written before. Typically, when somebody requests an affidavit of fact saying that it's occupied, I will send them those examples, and they can see what other people have done. Finally, well, I shouldn't say finally, then we're going to look at the cost and benefit of the program. When looking at the cost benefit of the program, we need to look at both the positives and the negatives. I think there are a number of important factors to note. First, banks are registering properties much quicker than they did at the onset of the program. They are, with the fees that we have, they are turning the properties around as quick as they can, getting them listed so that they can get the exemption. We have realtors call us before they're getting the listing to say, I'm going to get these listings, and I'll file as soon as I get them. Is there any money that was owed past due on them? Then we typically get a check for the past due. They register them with us and they're exempt for a year. And I don't hear from them again until they have additional properties. In addition, they hire management companies such as Safeguard and Three Brothers to make sure that there are no violations at the properties and that they remain in compliance. So what we're seeing is because of the program and because it's much easier now because they post it with Safeguard or Three Brothers, so we can go up with the house to look and see who's maintaining the property. If there is a violation, now we just call them and say, hey, you need to get somebody out here to fix the roof, those types of things, or we send the violation notice to them, they get it approved, and the repairs are made. In the time since the program was implemented, we went from a high of 232 vacant properties registered in 2015 to a low of 157 in 2017. So it's dropped considerably, since the onset of the program. The program has also allowed the housing inspectors to identify the responsible parties and ensure that they are maintaining them at the minimum standards of our property maintenance ordinance. with the positives, there's also negatives.
It's 7:30, I guess, just procedurally, are we going to continue, or do you want to table this until 7 o'clock or before our next meeting?
You know,
Or how?
for point of order, as long as the city council meeting starts at or after 7:30, we're fine.
That's what I'm asking, if council wants to
I would like to finish this if possible.
finish it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's only a few more slides transfer now.
Come on, Doug.
Very quickly.
Randy,
I've got questions.
With positives, there's always negatives. It makes it, the biggest problem that we've seen is really trying to make everybody aware of the program, and some property owners may have to pay fees or take the time to file an affidavit to show that the property was occupied. The property takes considerable time, or this program takes considerable time to administer and does take away from property maintenance and other responsibilities. So that's one of the negatives of the program. In addition, it requires additional work on behalf of the realtors and title agents because they're required to check with the community development department prior to any closing, and that's been going well. Next slide are the fees. The fees will remain the same since the beginning of the program, and staff will be looking at these fees and possibly recommending a reduction in the future. What was reduced is the penalty to 1/4 of the fee, so that was reduced. As far as the revenues are concerned, you can see that these are the revenues over the years. And beside it, I listed the number of vacant properties. As you remember, initially, we weren't getting people to register because we didn't tie it to utilities. Once we tied it to utilities in 2013, you saw a big jump in people beginning to register their properties. So the high, as I said, was in 2015, and it's dropped down over the years. Because of the change in fees and penalties, we did reduce the budget for this year. And then we're open to any suggestions or changes on the program.
Can we roll in, or let these people know that we're going to be enforcing our sidewalk program, so that it's just something else that they're going to be aware of? For somebody to just, will that be the distressed houses that are going to be bought by investors?
Letters will be sent out, and I think we're going to have a presentation on that tonight.
Right, let's stick with
But letters will be sent out
Stay
individually
focused with
to
this.
each of those properties.
the other questions.
Well, just one that I have is that, so when you quoted the different amount of, the lower registration, I think you said 232 in 2015, 157 in 2017. I just wonder how much you think that is related to this ordinance as opposed to a change in the housing market and the recession and all the things that we went through back in 2015. Do you think that things are just getting better and that helps those numbers?
I think that
It's a combination.
it's a combination. I think that things are getting better, but as I said, the banks are listing the properties much quicker now. So I think what we saw was when there was a lot of houses on the market, they listed them. Now we're getting down to the point where, they're trying to turn them over very quickly. So we don't have as many vacant properties on the market, which is good because that potentially means income tax for the city. The property tax is typically paid by the banks or whoever, so that doesn't really have any impact. But it's also, other impacts that it has on the city. People using city services or utilities, so they're paying utilities to the utility department. They're also buying things at local businesses, doing things of that nature. So I think, it's a combination, but I think the ordinance has helped.
I have one question. You have a vacant property that's been vacant for 2 years, and the person has got the exemption, and they're heading into the 3rd year, and they sell it. The new owner takes ownership. Does the clock start again, or are they in the 3rd year of being vacant?
Clock remains the same. As long as it's vacant, it's still vacant. So it would be in 3rd year. If they move in and occupy it, they're fine. If they come in and apply for an exemption because they need to fix it up before they move in, they're fine.
Okay.
So typically, that's what we're seeing.
So just to clarify, I was exempt, somebody was exempted for the first year or two that they had the property vacant. In the third year, they're no longer exempted, and now they have to pay their first vacancy fee. They pay a 3-year vacancy fee, not a 1 year.
Correct. That's what they would pay. Or they could request it, or typically, as soon as it changes over, we let them know that, and that's what we've done in situations, is we know the property is transferring because it comes through us for title. Remember, every property comes through us for title. Well, we will tell the title agent, make sure that they register the property with us, or let them know that they need to register the property. And we give them give each of the title agents a buying and selling in the city of Painesville that they can hand the person at closing to say, this is what you need, since you just bought, this is what you need to look for. And it goes into trash service, it goes into vacant property, it goes into rental registration, it goes into non-conforming property, so it explains everything. That one sheet explains everything that they could possibly be concerned about.
But am I correct, so it transfers, the title transfers from Lori to me, I have 90 days from that date to either occupy, file an exemption, or whatever else I choose to.
Right.
So there's still a pretty decent window for me to figure out what I need to do during that time.
Correct. And again, we try and notify them when we know it's transferring, or notify the title company, can you please make sure that they get the, buying and selling, so that they're aware that they need to register the property if they're going to leave it vacant for an extended period of time.
Yeah, so there's still a leeway.
Yes.
And then she wouldn't be responsible for the vacancies, the exemption years that I had. Or she would
No,
be.
she would not. And that is,
If there was a
there's a,
Because she filed an exemption and received.
no, if it transferred without them paying, the only thing that we could hold back is utilities until they pay. Per the memorandum in your packet from Joe Gurley. We can't hold the new property owner responsible for those fees.
But if I can clarify, you're asking the number of years it's been vacant, you're asking if that clock restarts.
Yeah, and again, I'm asking that because I was exempt, like, if somebody's exempted, what does an exemption mean? Is that they aren't held accountable for that vacancy, so I just,
The exemption is they're not held accountable for the fees, but the years of vacancy, they're still held accountable for.
and we think that's a,
That was a decision that was debated in the Housing Task Force, and that's how they felt it needed to be implemented type this.
Here's what happens a lot of times. The banks were playing games too. So what they were doing is they were transferring it from one holding company to another to avoid the vacant property. And saying, so we find things like that would occur, but as long as it's still vacant, the fees it's still vacant. Does that make sense?
I guess I keep just wondering what's the, exempt is exempt. I'm exempt, but and I hear what she's explaining, and I just, again, I'm saying, I understand that the Housing Task Force agreed to it, and I'm still questioning whether that's ethical or not.
Ethical for who? In what way
I
would it
don't
be
know.
unethical?
If the word is ethical, maybe proper interpretation.
Are you thinking that your exemptions years would not carry forward to my exemption years? Or what is the flaw that you're seeing there?
Well, I guess I'm seeing that if I'm exempt from something because I was doing something, I had it on the market or whatever, then I was exempt from it. I shouldn't be held accountable for it if I was exempt. But I'm still being held accountable because then the third year comes along and I have to pay. Now it's time for me to pay. And now the fees are making me pay for those first 2 years that I was exempt because they're increased. So I was exempted, but now my fees are higher the third year, or something.
And I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think it goes back to the intent of the program. The intent of the program is to get occupancy, and so if they're leaving it, vacant for the third year, that's going into 3 years of, a vacancy with no one, with basically no occupancy, no one living there, no one
But
paying
if you-
utilities, no
If you
one.
had it on the market, you couldn't sell it, and it didn't sell for 2 years, no matter the fact that you tried to get it sold, but it didn't sell. And so now, okay, I'm gonna take a break, I've been trying to work with these realtors, I'm gonna change my attack of this, do this differently. But now I'm accountable for those 2 years that I was diligently trying to market my property. So I just am afraid that we're punishing people, or we're fining or giving people fees for, even though they made the effort to keep the place up and do all the things they had to do, but it didn't work for them, they weren't able to sell it. So, that's all. I just want to make sure that we're treating people fairly and respectfully.
Well, and my response to that would be a couple things. One, if you're pricing things, right now it's still a buyer's market, if you're pricing things fairly and appropriately for the market that you're in, things are moving in Painesville, constantly. Transactions are occurring, houses are selling, houses are being bought, those things are happening. So I think the intent of it was because people were not pricing things fairly and appropriately for the market that they're in. They were purposely, well, I'm satisfying the requirement of this because it's listed with a realtor, but I'm selling it for $250,000 in a market that says it should be $185,000. So that was one of the issues that we were having at the time. If you are making an honest, true effort, then those properties will most likely sell. But the alternative is, if I've applied for an exemption for 2 years, for whatever reasoning, then reason tells me if I'm not selling the property and it's still mine, I should apply for a third year so I don't pay for the first 2 years I was exempt. And Doug's willing, he cited several reasons and examples for why that exemption would be approved. So there's no reason somebody 2 years into an exemption should have to pay fees at 3 years if they're following the process the same as they did the first 2 years.
I'm just asking again, why get an exemption if I'm accountable for the time anyway? So why doesn't those exemptions go back to zero? I think you're complicating it more than it needs to be complicated. I think the question is simple. If I forgave you a debt, and then a year later, you still owe me, and I doubled what you owed me because I forgave you the first year, that's all I'm asking. And I don't need to get into a big, long debate and delay the council meeting or anything. It's a question I have about, I'm just asking, is that fair, and are we treating people well? And the other thing is, are we allowing for things like, if I bought a property for $180,000 and the market dropped out, and that property was no longer worth $180, and so now I have to price it for $150 and take the loss, or wait a year or two, and maybe the market will bounce back. I have the right to do that as somebody who's a property owner. I also feel that we have a right to not live in a piece of property or occupy a piece of property we own. I don't know that it's right to say to people that you have to live or occupy what you own. People in Florida don't occupy their homes all the time, they don't have to register. A lot of people own things that they don't want to live in for whatever reason, but they don't want to sell it. As long as I'm maintaining it and taking care of it, even if I don't have window coverings on it or furniture in it, and I'm doing my part, I'm not a burden to the city, as long as I'm maintaining my property. If I have my utilities turned off, if I have my electricity turned off, and I don't want to live in that house for whatever reason, as long as I'm not blighting that property and leaving it filthy and dirty and falling down, why don't I have a right to do that? So I'm questioning the ordinance as a whole. I do think it's done some good things, and we don't have to, I have.
Well, no, but I think in that situation, then you complete an affidavit of facts and ask for an exemption, and you keep it vacant because you want to, and you continue to prove that you are maintaining
Unless it's not one of the reasons for exemption allowing, and they say, no, you can't have your exemption.
Sure, Doug, do we have a lot of that in Painesville, what Lori's talking about, where people just keep the house up and is it a high percentage or?
Yeah, I think I've had probably 2 or 3 where they've kept it 10 years or more vacant, but they maintained it and they were granted, occupancy when they filed the affidavit.
Can we,
Yep.
move into our council meeting?
Yep.
Next time, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to our city council meeting for Monday, March 19th. In consideration of those surrounding, please turn off your cell phones or other electronic devices. Valerie, can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Shute?
Here.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Here.
Mrs. Denalo?
Here.
Mrs. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Augustine?
Here.
Mr. Fodor?
Present.
Mr. Hack?
Here. I need agenda approval. There's a change in agenda. We will be editing the following committee names under committee reports: PCA, Economic Development, Planning Commission, and Safety Commission, as well as fixing the spelling. Resolution number 6. Can I have a motion to approve the changed agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Invocation will be given by Tom Fitzgerald, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Holy One, you have given us the responsibility of leadership in the affairs of our city. May what we say and do here this night be worthy in your sight and for the benefit of those who have entrusted to us this duty. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was pretty quick reaction.
Yes.
You still got it.
That's our public comment. Visitors, if you now want to be recognized, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Go. We need to have a motion to pass the meetings from our regular meeting, March 5th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to pass the regular minutes as written.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Public comments. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. When called upon, please use the podium and clearly state your name and address into the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Any dialogue must be conducted through me as president of council, although your comments or questions be addressed to the council, administration, or both. There'll be a presentation from Leon Shutnick from the Lake County Crime. That will take Leanne Shutnick.
Close enough.
All right. 3 minutes. So who would like to speak? I mean, I'll have you go next. But anyone else? Great. Leanne, take the stage. Your address?
It's Shahana, by the way.
All right.
It's all right, I'm used to it. My address is 52 Kensington Avenue here in Painesville. I am the Assistant Laboratory Director at the Lake County Crime Lab, and I would like to thank you for allowing me to come speak to you tonight. As many of you are probably aware, the laboratory has a levy on the ballot for May 8th, a .4 mil levy for operating expenses. This is a critical need for the laboratory at this time. Our last levy was passed in 1999. The levy was a .3 mil levy. It generates approximately $1.5 million for operating expenses, which was perfectly sufficient for 1999. It was actually generated a surplus, and we held that surplus until 2008. In 2008, we started having to dip into that surplus, mostly because of technology. As we all know, from 1999 till now, technology has greatly increased. In 99 was the time of the pager. We didn't have cell phones. I think we were still on PlayStation 1 at that time. So technology has come a long way, and along with that technology comes an increased cost. But that technology has allowed us to do so many more things at the laboratory that we couldn't do in 1999. Because of that technology, now our caseload has also increased, but our funding has not. We're also very well aware, everyone in Ohio, of the opioid epidemic, which is also increasing our caseload significantly at the laboratory. We are at a critical point right now where the estimated cost of operation for the laboratory this year is $3 million. We completely depleted our surplus in 2017. So we have nothing to go on going forward. If this levy does not pass, the cost to the criminal justice system in Lake County is going to be significant. At a very minimum, we will be decreasing services. At a maximum, the laboratory will have to close. If we have to do either of those, for your law enforcement agencies, for your prosecuting attorney's office, that will mean that they will have to take their evidence to the closest laboratory to get your testing done for free will be Richfield. Along with taking that to the state lab, you're going to face backups. It's going to take them a lot longer to get the testing done. There are also some things that the state lab just does not have the resources to do. One of the primary things we test in the DNA lab here are property crimes and what we call touch DNA from people just handling objects. The state lab for their DNA department cannot take on those cases because they don't have the resources. They're really more focusing on your violent crimes, your sexual assaults and things of that nature. So you would lose the ability to have those crimes solved. And we are solving a large number of property crimes here in Lake County and keeping the lesser offenders from potentially escalating into violent offenders. The expert testimony is just not going to be there because you're going to be fighting for a single analyst that may be testing cases from multiple areas of Ohio, all needing that person at approximately the same time. So it's going to snowball into an effect. Also, if we don't want to wait maybe for the state lab to do the testing for free, there's an expense to your law enforcement agencies to send that testing elsewhere. So it is just a dire critical need, and I'm here just to ask for your support to get the word out. We've had Fairport Harbor as well as Mentor on the Lake councils pass resolutions in support of the laboratory levy. This levy, being a 0.4 mil levy, estimated to generate 2 to 3 million additional. It is an additional levy. Cost to the taxpayer is going to be $14 annually per $100,000 valuation. I think that $14 is a pretty good bargain for public safety here in Lake County. And I'd be happy to address any questions that anyone may have regarding the laboratory.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions, and I don't know if it needs to be this formal, but I would like to make a motion to direct our administration to craft a resolution in support of this levy.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Mrs. Donallo.
Yes.
Mrs. Jenkins.
Yes.
Mr. Augustine.
Yes.
Mr. Fodor.
Yes.
Mrs. Shute.
Yes.
Mr. Hack.
Yes.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Committee reports. We now have a committee report from the BZA meeting.
Lynn, do you mind stepping out for this one?
Good evening. At our BZA meeting, we had one request, a variance to allow for parking in the front setback at 686 East Erie Street, and it was granted with stipulation for landscaping to buffer the parking area from the street.
Questions? Thank you. We now have a committee report from the Economic Development meeting.
That's me.
All right.
So we had a really good economic development meeting. We met and set up our future committee meeting dates. We are going to be meeting June 5th, September 5th, and then January 3rd, 2019. We also acknowledge that there may be some additional meetings as needed for some of the things that Kathy has going on with the city. And we will be meeting every time in City Hall second floor conference room at 4 p.m. unless there's some sort of technological needs that we need to be elsewhere. We defined the role for the committee and clarified our statements as directed by council previously. Our statement for Economic Development Committee is that this committee reviews ongoing projects related to economic development. This committee should discuss annexation issues, downtown revitalization, community reinvestment areas, and issues related to other major development projects. The members of the Economic Development Committee are also the Community Reinvestment Area Committee. As the CRA Council, they shall advise, make annual inspections of CRA property, and advise the housing officer. We reviewed the Economic Development Strategic Plan. We currently have 2 proposals, and we're going to be moving forward with the Lakeland Community College Nonprofit Center, is that what they're formally called? Who will be working with Kathy to update our 2010 through 2015 Economic Development Strategic Plan. Per council, we reviewed the John F. Clare Award and determined to reinstate that. We will be seeking nominations actually this year. I think Kathy's going to get that information out soon. And then we adjourned into an executive session to discuss sensitive information in relation to ORC 121.228. And we hope to be able to discuss the issues publicly very soon because there's a lot of really awesome, exciting stuff happening in our economic development department. So that's it.
Thank you. Report from the Planning Commission.
The Planning Commission had one item come before it. It was a temporary use of the first floor of 47 South State Street, also known as the Gage House. They were given a temporary use permit to allow events and meetings on the first floor space. This was given for a 6-month period. At the end of the 6 months, they are allowed to come back to Planning Commission to ask for an additional 6 months. That's it.
Safety Committee.
That's me again. So we met on March 13th. We set our meetings for the remainder of the year for May 8th, August 14th, and November 20th. Again, these meetings will be held in the second floor conference room at City Hall at 4:30 p.m. Per council direction, we reviewed our committee statement and we agreed on this one. The Citizen Safety Committee maintains coordination with the police and fire departments. They gather input on community safety issues and community policing initiatives from the citizens. This committee should review all items of concern directed here by council. This includes appropriate levels of service and equipment replacement schedules. The committee will make recommendations to council to improve the safety forces and the safety of the community. Our police chief, Waterman, updated the committee on the relationship that he has with the Painesville City School District. They're working very diligently with the schools to train the teachers on several areas of safety. They are also going to be moving forward with a multi-jurisdictional active shooter scenario with the local schools. They have always been training. They've been doing this training for quite some time. But in this situation, they're actually going to simulate a real-life situation. The students will not be present for the simulation. They are doing it strictly with the school personnel, and they will be working with area jurisdictions in this scenario, including our police and fire. They're going to do a full crisis situation. Chief Waterman was saddened by the fact that we have to do these types of trainings, but he's working together to be as prepared as possible in case a tragedy like this ever does happen in Painesville. We're very confident in the plans that they have in place. During the budget review, council had asked questions about the deployment times and staffing levels for the fire department. Chief Malachek updated us and on the National Fire Protection Association, the standards for staffing and deployment. The national standard is to reach 90% of our calls within 5 minutes. We are currently meeting that threshold, the 5-minute threshold, 82.76% of the time. He showed us maps that were actually very effective of what areas were not meeting that threshold and provided a lot of reasons for why we're not meeting those thresholds. I know council in previous years had discussed a lot of times, and there's been a lot of studies since the early 1990s regarding the solutions to this, and they've been pretty consistent every time. Our options are to either increase financial support and build a second station, which will obviously increase our need for personnel and apparatuses. Okay, and and it'll allow for much quicker response times, or to look into doing an East End Fire District, working with area communities who have existing fire departments of their own. The chief felt that this would be more effective over time, but it will still involve building and or resituating the fire stations. The district may not lead to an increase in personnel costs and could also create some efficiencies due to getting rid of overlap, because we'll be sharing apparatuses and and having, you know, less higher cost personnel. In the past, the reason that these suggestions did not move forward is because of either the necessary financial support or the political support to make the suggestions work. And the committee agreed that we would like to kind of have an open discussion with council on this topic to be able to give the administration clear direction and staff on how to proceed with looking into resolutions for this issue.
Thank you for the safety report, or minutes. I'd like to move in on the legislation. If you wish to comment on legislation, you must request to do so at this time. Those make such a request will then be called upon after the reading. Any dialogue must be conducted through me as president of council. All other comments or questions can be addressed to the council, administration, or both. When called upon, please use the podium. Remember, clearly state your name and address into the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Ordinance 1 is tabled. Resolution number 2, third reading. Resolution number 3, second reading. Resolution number 4, second reading. Resolution number 5, first reading. Resolution number 6, first reading. Ordinance number 1, number 7, first reading. Number 8, ordinance, first reading. We'll move on to ordinance, or resolution number 2, third reading.
A resolution authorizing and directing the city manager to advertise for bids and enter into a contract, including any and all ensuing change orders with the lowest and best bidder for the 2018 road improvement program and declaring an emergency.
Again, this resolution is for transit and for the new service and the streets.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Mrs. Donato?
Yes.
Mrs. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Augustine?
Yes.
Mr. Fodor?
Yes.
Mrs. Shute?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mr. Hack?
Yes, resolution number 2 passed. Resolution number 3, second reading.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Lake County Board of Commissioners and other pertinent parties to extend the city of Painesville sewerage services to the benefited lots of Asbury Point Development in Lake County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Any questions or comments? No, I'd like to see this run for a third reading.
Thank you.
Resolution number 4, second reading.
Resolution authorizing and directing the city manager to advertise for bids and enter into a contract, including any and all ensuing change orders with the lowest and best bidder for the reconstruction of Walnut Street, declaring an emergency.
Any questions or comments? See none, I'd like to see this stay on for third reading. Thank you. Resolution number 5, first reading.
A resolution authorizing and directing the city manager to advertise for bids and enter into a contract, including any and all ensuing change orders with the lowest and best bidder for the 2018 sidewalk repair and replacement program, and declaring an emergency.
I'm sorry. Yes, this is for the sidewalk program. We're going to repair all the city-owned sidewalks this summer. And then do those sidewalk presentation.
Any questions or comments? You can just go for 3 readings.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Resolution number 6, first reading.
A resolution authorizing and directing the city manager to advertise for bids and enter into a contract, including any and all ensuing change orders with the lowest and best bidder for the construction of a new parking lot and declaring an emergency.
The legislation before you is to allow us to bid and award a contract for the resurfacing of the parking lot. Initially, we had received an engineer's estimate that was for $4,000. The cost, or $400,000, sorry.
Oh, you can say I'm right.
The
First number is better.
little difference there. The cost was budgeted in the 2000 capital improvement budget, but when the plans were completed, the original estimate was increased significantly. We have revised the scope. There were items in there that we didn't feel needed to be included in the scope. Once we have removed those, we have identified additional funding for the project to move forward this year. We're requesting that we use that money from closing out projects and money from the electric department for the lighting in the parking lot. So a budget adjustment will be necessary, and Andy will be bringing that forward. But we are requesting to move forward with this legislation.
Do you think this will be done by the time the party in the park will be here? Okay. Any other questions?
If we were to pass it sooner, do we increase our odds?
Probably looking at 90 to 120 days construction period just due to the retaining wall.
So even if we started in May, it wouldn't be done until August.
Well, there's no comments, we'll leave this on first reading.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance number 7, first reading.
An ordinance amending appropriations for the current expenses and expenditures of the city of Painesville, state of Ohio, for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2018, and amending the original appropriations for the 2018 operating budget and declaring an emergency.
Okay, we are requesting a budget increase of $212,000. $119,000 of this is being offset by grants. The fire department received a $48,000 grant to get some power cots and some Lucas devices. Economic Development got a $70,000 grant to remove some old gas tanks. Also in this budget increase, we are increasing about $12,000 for the new communication coordinator. The police department is requesting $7,200 for additional training expenses. $750,000 is being requested in the electric construction fund.
75,000, drop to 0.
Oh, yeah, that might give me a heart attack. 75,000.
You and Doug
Thank
switch
you.
places today.
75,000 for the parking lot that Doug just talked about.
Zeros are important for a money guy, just saying.
Not for me, I guess. We are asking that this gets approved tonight to continue with city operations as quick as possible.
Questions, comments?
So we have a deficit based on this change of around $96,000 to $94,000, and that's already, we have that money available.
Yes, we'll be eating into the carryover to pay for this.
Okay, all right.
Move to suspend?
Second.
Mrs. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Augustine?
Yes.
Mr. Fodor?
Yes.
Mrs. Shu?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mrs. Dinello?
Yes.
Mr. Hack?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Mr. Augustine?
Yes.
Mr. Fodor?
Yes.
Mrs. Shu?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mrs. Dinello?
Yes.
Mrs. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Hack?
Yes, ordinance number 7 passed. Ordinance number 8, first reading.
Thank you.
An ordinance amending Chapter 929 of the Painesville Code of 1998 relating to electric service.
Okay, this is the, waiting for ordinance where we work with our consultant, United Utility Financial Services. Dan Casbon came here a couple times and gave presentations. And from the original mission was to adjust our rates and adjust the PCA formula while maintaining a revenue neutral position. So we think, we believe, and we know that we have that. That's why it took so long to unfold the onion, so to speak, to get it to the core of the rate structure. The PCA will go down, the rates will change a little bit, and the revenue neutral will be maintained. But when I say revenue neutral, it's important to note that that means the money will stay the same. Some bills are going to go down, some bills are going to go up, but the money coming into the department will stay the same. So that's what it is, and apologize for the delay, but it took a while. And I think we got a good ordinance.
Yes.
So some will go up and some will go down. Do we have an idea of who or what sector to expect to go up and which sector will go down?
Yes, we believe that most of the higher end users, industrial, commercial, will be going down. Some of the smaller users, residential, will be going up slightly. I think overall that's pretty much the picture.
And there could be an increase in some of the customers in the township as well.
And I know we've had a presentation, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. So what can our residents expect to see as far as percentage-wise in their own bills?
For the most part, assuming the consultant is correct and we think he did a good job, it should be relatively flat.
So they won't get an increase, or they will?
No, so even with the increase, it'll be pennies on the dollar, it won't be a large percentage increase.
But if they were lower end customers, they might be going up. Basically, the plan was if you were paying $100 before, maybe 50 is going to the PCA and 50 is going to the kilowatt charge. Now they're trying to get it a little bit, maybe 75 to the kilowatt charge and 25 to the PCA.
So your kilowatt costs will go up.
But
Your
the PCA costs
will
will
go
go
down. Yes. Thank you.
I think we talked about doing simulations with actual people's stuff. Did that get done?
We have done numerous simulations. Unfortunately, we have 20,000 customers, so we can't get everybody, but we did sample a lot.
We think we got a pretty good representative.
We see a couple.
Would it be possible to see a couple of those at the next council meeting? You know, just so that we can see what the bill change, you know, like what is it gonna look like on their bills?
Okay.
Because it's gonna be alarming to some people to see those numbers change, even though the bottom line is the same.
It can be my bill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Surprise. Here's one of them.
You said industrial users.
Yeah. We'll leave this on first reading.
Okay.
That's it. All in favor?
Thank you.
Is there, and I don't remember, I know we talked about it so much, is there a cap so that if somebody, just by the way these situations roll out, their increase is big, is there a cap that we're putting in place, or do you anticipate no?
No, there's not. Unfortunately, some of our low-end users were being supplemented by our high-end users.
Okay.
And so we're trying to even that out a little bit right now.
The increases aren't all that much that you would say you need to cap it. You're within a couple dollars of what you were paying.
Because remember, the idea is to do this over a 3-year period, so they're very incremental steps. So most people won't even notice a difference until the end of that 3rd year when we reevaluate and see if any rate increases do have to occur.
And then also in this legislation, the rates, the kilowatt rates are actually going up for this year, but then they're dropping at about a 4% clip over the next 2 years.
Because the customer charges.
Right.
Great, we'll keep this on first reading then. We have no unfinished business, new business, none. Department presentation, engineering, Dan.
So we're going to talk about the sidewalk repair and rehabilitation program. The goals of this project was to create and maintain a safe and accessible network of pedestrian travel within the city of Painesville, improve the overall quality of the city's infrastructure, fulfill the goals set by City Council, and fulfill the goal of the 2006 Comprehensive Plan created to continue the growth and development of the city. We are also fulfilling the goal of the 2015 Central Lake County Lakefront Connectivity Plan. In 1994, City Council passed an ordinance which requires property owners to maintain sidewalks. City Council and staff agreed to resume the sidewalk repair and rehabilitation program for properties with existing sidewalks. As you know, we passed, or not passed, but we are, have put forward the resolution to do the city-owned sidewalks. So we wanted to bring this forward so that people would understand the marks that they're going to see on the sidewalk. So the X would be the homeowner's responsibility and the O is the city's responsibility. It is administered and enforced by the engineering department. So you will see a lot of O's drawn out on the sidewalks throughout the city. We did an analysis of the sidewalks last year. Last summer we hired 2 interns to do that. And when we did that analysis, we came up with this map. So there is a lot of sidewalk repair that needs to be done, both city and homeowner. So this is the results of that analysis. Some examples of the sidewalk deficiencies that we look for are cracks, greater than an inch, spalling, so you've got like a really pitted, uneven surface, vertical separation or tread hazards. Yes, we use a stencil.
That was very nice.
Yeah. Excessive cracking, joint failures, which also can lead to trip hazards, root damage, both by tree-borne trees and homeowner trees. And then, if it's not concrete, we have a few areas where they have paved over the concrete sidewalk, and that needs to be rectified. So that's another reason. So we do have a sidewalk permit. The sidewalk permit fee is $45. It's a zoning fee. And we have 2 inspections that take place. A pre-pour inspection that will be performed to check the depth of the concrete and the subgrade. And then a final inspection will be performed once restoration is completed. Inspections can be scheduled concurrently, right before the concrete truck comes. But the contractor or the homeowner assumes all risks should it fail the initial inspection. And then to schedule an inspection, we would call the engineering department. And then just our contact information if you want to obtain any of the sidewalk information. Any questions?
Lori?
I'm just wondering how quickly the engineering department is able to respond to a request for an inspection. Like, is it usually pretty quick turnaround?
We typically ask for a 24-hour call, but we've done it quicker than that. If we're available, we'll come on as soon as we can. either Jerry, Bob, or myself.
And do you find usually there's a delay between the inspection of the forms and the actual form of concrete? And should people be careful of that because things could get shifted or moved, or is that usually not an issue?
It's typically not an issue. The only thing you might have an issue with is if your subgrade isn't proper. We might ask you to dig it out and put in your 4 inches of stone base.
Any questions? So is this going up on our website,
Yes.
the presentation? And do we also have like a one-page sheet that talks about what the subgrade needs to be and what the specifications are, that if a homeowner would come, and where would they go to pick up that information?
They would pick up that information in our department. I'm currently updating the 2010 pamphlet so that we can start stuffing it maybe with like utility bills or having it out on the counter at City Hall so that we can start getting people ready to fix their sidewalks.
Tom?
When will the inspection start, at least for the residents?
We will start sending out violation notices this year, and then homeowners will have a year, that particular sample, because we're not doing the whole city, we're doing just a portion of it. So, those homeowners will have a year to complete their work, and then the following year we'll send out more, and it'll just keep rotating.
Can you tell us which portion you're starting out with this year?
We're starting in Ward 1,
Okay.
and we're also looking at tying it to the road improvement projects.
Okay, thank you.
Will the city help homeowners coordinate with contractors so that, 3 or 4 homeowners can work together instead of just needing 1 yard of concrete or 2 yards, which is more expensive?
We encourage residents to do that, especially because we're going to be doing the whole street when we do the street, to get with the neighbors and save some money together. What we can give is a list of contractors, but we can't recommend one over the other.
No, I understand you can't recommend, but can the city help coordinate, neighbors or just different streets so the truck can go from street to street, with a full 10-yard load of concrete?
No, that'll be on the homeowners to coordinate with themselves.
Well, can I mention, we do have the opportunity and ordinances allow for the development of homeowners associations. And one of the reasons that council did that was so that communities, areas had a way to come together to communicate about a common need or common issue, like drainage or sidewalks or things like that. So if our residents don't already have a neighborhood association, and they want to start thinking about, these bigger infrastructure issues, then I would encourage them to contact one of the council members, and or I think it's the planning department.
The police department.
The police department? Yeah.
Yeah, community resource officers handle that.
Oh, can handle that. Can. Okay, I got it. So just encourage them to contact, and if you already have an association, I know Bank Street does, I know about the DNA, I know about Housing Park, obviously, that to, think about bringing that to the table to talk about in your association.
Cool. And I would add, when we purchased our house, we have a very large tree in the front, and it was lifting our front sidewalk on our property, not the street sidewalk. And so when we redid that, we also redid our street sidewalk. And I just walked next door and said, hey, your sidewalk looks awful, do you want a discount? So I mean, this is when we can get old-fashioned and just look for a bunch of X's and knock on some doors and say, hey, let's do this cheaper and work together. I think this is, you don't necessarily have to create an HOA to be able to ask neighbors if they want to share a truck with you. So I think this is a great, like I said, my neighbors got brand new sidewalks, and then unfortunately George came and dug them up 2 years later, but whatever. We paid for them initially. But yeah, so I think this is a great way for people to just, do the old-fashioned thing and knock on a door, rather than, expecting communications and coordinations to occur.
That brings up a good question. How would a homeowner know there's infrastructure on the
Well, but the city replaces it if they do.
You have to do it oops. You know, we do the oops ticket just like anybody else, and we come out and mark where the utilities are. In the state of Ohio, anytime you dig, in fact, anytime you put a shovel in the ground, even in your own flower beds, you're supposed to call oops, so we can come out and mark all your utilities.
Questions or comments?
One more question. Would that happen automatically when they file for a permit?
The oops?
Yeah.
No, that's up to either the contractor that you hire or the individual homeowner to make that call. It's a free service.
We may want to include the information in the info.
I believe it is in the
Okay.
info, but I will double check.
Seeing no more questions, thank you for the presentation. Administrative report, Law Director,
No report tonight.
City Manager.
I just wanted to mention that we did hire a communications coordinator, should be starting on April 2nd. And I'm very excited, and she's very excited, so we have a lot of work.
Are we allowed to know who she
Oh,
is?
Kathleen Sullivan is her name. She actually is a contract communications coordinator for Avery Dennison currently, and she put in her 2 weeks notice today, so she will be joining us in 2 weeks.
Thank you, I'm excited.
I'm excited too.
All right. Clerk of Council, correspondence.
The next regular council meeting will be held Monday, April 2nd at 7:30. Breakfast with the Bunny is March 24th, 8:30 to 9:30 at the Painesville United Methodist Church. The Easter egg hunt follows that at 10 a.m. in Veterans Park. April 21st is the Earth Day celebration and repurposed craft fair from 1 to 4 at Veterans Park. And credit articles are due April 6th.
Thank you. Closing comments, Nick?
I just wanted to thank everybody for coming and speaking with us today. Also, I just wanted to share this. I received an email today from Painesville Merchant and Farmers Market. It's a social media workshop, and it's featuring Allie Thompson, who's a marketing consultant and coach. And that's Tuesday, April 10th at 10 a.m. at Morley Library. And I think that sounds very interesting for local businesses and anybody that would kind of help get themselves out there. It's a workshop provided by the city of Painesville, and reservations are required, and you have to contact the bar Monticello.
Thank you. Jim?
Yes. Last Thursday, there was a group of us that went on a field trip. Christine, myself, and Monica, and Tom. And we went to Wadsworth to take a look at their automated meter infrastructure. They've had it for about 10 years. You know, currently we are looking at moving in that direction. The people that we sat down with were their mayor, their civil service director. Their mayor's been there for about 11 years, if I remember correctly, and I think she was there at the beginning of the project and pretty much through it. The service director has been there for 4 years, so he's coming about halfway. But then the other 3 gentlemen, maybe the IT guy wasn't there quite as long, but the other 2 gentlemen were there from the beginning of the project. And so to sit down and be able to talk with them and talk about the pros and cons of the project and how the benefits and the minuses was very interesting. You know, they talked about customer service all the time and how to improve customer service and how this actually helps improve customer service from minimizing outages in real time, because the meters that are on your house are constantly talking back and forth. It's just not one-way communication. So when something goes down and there's an outage, the other person at the end of the line can see that there's an outage, and you don't have to wait for somebody to pick up the phone and call, even though we would still want people to do that. They would be able to determine that there is an outage, pinpoint it a lot quicker, and start getting people back up online. Reading the meters is a whole lot easier, because obviously when you have people walking around and reading meters, you have the human error factor. This is just a computer error factor, and you know how computers work. But they said that when they started their project, they were kind of going with the old system and the new system, and they had a couple of trial projects or pilot projects first, and they were going head to head. And the new meters were 100% accurate. You don't have the personnel, then you don't need meter readers. You do need a few more IT people. So I'm not quite sure if there's a reduction in the cost for personnel, but there is a greater accuracy in your reading. And if there is a problem, they're able to pinpoint it very quickly. And in terms of customer service, it's better for the customer. They have an incentive program to reduce costs during peak times. And when you get your printout from this, you can see when you're using most of your energy. And obviously at 8 o'clock in the morning when all the factories and everybody's starting to fire up, those are some of your peak times and the energy costs more. 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night when there isn't quite as much energy, the costs are less. So if you regulate the homeowners, if they regulate how they use their energy, it was cost savings to them. They couldn't emphasize it enough in terms of real-time data, data trends, and the conservation, if I can read my own writing, of energy. And the biggest thing is in instituting a project like this is trust. Because people always will maybe questioning when, the local government says, we're here and we're here to help you. But over a period of time, this has proved to be a very worthwhile project. Now, they not only do their electric now, they also do water. So you don't have any estimates. If there's a blizzard or anything going on that week, there aren't the estimates. The data is real time and it makes things a whole lot easier. The one thing they did do, and I'm glad we have a communication person coming on to work with, I know when the people did AMP did their presentation, they talked about a PR program. That Wadsworth did mailings, town meetings, messages, in the outgoing bills. They had a working group of citizens that were used to give feedback and how the product was being delivered. So there was constant feedback coming to and from the city, from their residents and how things were going. So I think it was very worthwhile. There was it encouraged me that we're headed on the right track. They had 12,600 meters that they, if I remember correctly, that they put into play, and they're still running strong. They aren't any more defective than the old ones. If anything, they're better and they're more efficient as time goes on. I guess what I'm hoping is maybe in terms of our public relations, we have a couple of large programs coming on with the sidewalk program and the electric brake program coming. Whoever has a Painesville Pride in the next couple of months, and I don't know who that is, but it might be a good idea to try to mention those programs, because I know the Painesville Pride is to a lot of homes. And that's all I got at this moment.
Thank you. Christine?
I just want to congratulate our electric department on the RP3 Reliability Award. When I saw that in the News Herald, it was pretty exciting, especially because I did get a couple of calls when we had the outage, and I was hoping the folks that called me read the newspaper. So congratulations. I think it's a job well done, and I've always been very proud of you guys anyway, so thank you.
Thank you. Lori?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the administration as well as council members for working so hard to improve the aesthetic appearance of our community, work on our infrastructure issues, and actually in doing some of these things, we're actually providing for the safety of our residents, and it's very much appreciated. And I just want to go back to and I know this was part of our work session and not our council meeting, but I just want to go back to vacant properties and the dangers associated with that. From the court, working with juvenile court, what I often see in these vacant properties is kids getting together and having parties and things like that in those areas. And I remember having one vacant property in my own community right behind me. And I remember one day sitting in my yard and watching young kids with mattresses on their heads walk down the street to put them into that vacant piece of property. I was able to call Doug and get that managed very, very quickly, so I appreciate all that. So I just want to mention that to say to people that when you're maybe frustrated by something you didn't know or didn't understand, to remember that a lot of what we're doing really is for the betterment of our community as a whole. And as hard as that can be sometimes, I do believe that our administrative team really works to work with people and to try to help them in the best ways they can when they can. And so again, it's a rough job sometimes. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Katie?
Okay, a couple things. This weekend, Harvey High School will be debuting their spring musical production. They're doing Shrek. I believe the productions are 7 p.m. Friday and Saturday evening and 2 p.m. Saturday and Sunday afternoons. I think it's $6 for adults and less than that for kids, and senior citizens are free. I don't know how they determine who is a senior citizen or not, but that's between you and them. I also wanted to revisit the safety committee's safety committee report to get some direction from council on whether or not we want to have a presentation, perhaps from our fire chief, to discuss the two options for quality of service. I think it would be very beneficial for council to see the maps and discuss the options that are available to us. I think that we did request a cost-benefit analysis the week after meeting. Is that correct, Monica? Did I make that up?
Yeah, the direction was how many bodies would it take to bring us up to that 90% level of service and what that cost is.
Yeah. So I think, council needs to kind of give some feedback. You are more than welcome to give that directly to me on whether or not we want to see that information at a council meeting in the near future, so that we can kind of get some information put down. I think as I stated in my report, this has been discussed quite a bit, several times over the years, and I think we're at the point where we either need to move forward or just accept our circumstances. So there's that. And then just a point of order question. I know when we do, and we're all kind of learning the procedures of the meeting, but my question is, maybe for our legal, when we do a question of all in favor, do we also have to do an opposite, any opposed?
If they're all in favor, then.
I mean, if it's a 7-0 vote, I don't think it's necessary to
If
say
it's
all
not a
opposed.
roll call and it's just an ayes have it, how does the president determine that he's heard aye from everybody?
The council can certainly set their own procedure, and if the council thinks that it's appropriate to have the ayes and the nays called each time, then you can certainly do that. You can do it by way of an understanding, or if you think you need it more formal, that way as a council will.
Thank you, and that's it for me.
Mr. Fitzgerald, Tom.
I'd like to thank Leanne and Doug for their presentations this evening and congratulate the electric department. Good job, guys, on the award. And also thank the city for our Wadsworth visit. I'd like to piggyback on what Jim said. It was well worth the time going down to Wadsworth and visiting the people there who were involved in the smart meter program. They're really enthusiastic about it still, all these years later. It's been about 8 years, I think they've had them now. And they stress that it reduces operating costs, increases efficiency, and actually enhances customer service. So I think it's a really good program. I'm looking forward to being part of it here, and I'm looking forward to us moving forward on this smart meter program. That's all.
Thank you. I also want to remind people about the play this weekend from Friday to Sunday. And both my kids will be playing in the pit. They're in marching band. And then also, Harvey High School is having a fundraiser for their marching band Tuesday, March 27th from 5 to 7 at Harvey. And this year, the marching band will be going to Orlando for Disney. And whatever support that we can get from the community to help out with the parents. I think it's a pretty expensive trip, but it's also, my kids have never been there. So it's great. It's one of the things that they're going to check off. Right now, I'd like to close, and can I get a motion to get into our executive session?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to move to executive session in accordance with Article 2, Section 6, parentheses 3, to discuss pending or potential litigation involving the city.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Fodor?
Yes.
Mrs. Shute?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mrs. Denalo?
Yes.
Mrs. Jenkins? Yes. Mr. Augustine?
Yes.
Mr. Hack?
Yes. Let's move over to the portal, please.
Wait,